Hey, what's up guys? I am Joe from Workbench, and this week we're going to talk about how to use noise in text animators to make interesting effects. While you could use a wiggly selector in a text animator to get kind of close to what we're doing, we're going to use noise and an expression selector because it allows us to have more control. Also, the randomization in a wiggly selector is a lot more all over the place, and this is more tight, compact. Things that are next to each other kind of stick with the same kind of motion. So that's why we're going to go with this route instead. If you want more information on the way we do everything in here, you can download the project file for the deep dive. So here's the first example with the most basic expression in this tutorial. If we turn this off, you can see that we just have a field of dots. They're just period characters. It's 15 by 15 dots, but in this case, the noise is applied just linearly down the whole thing. So we have this set up in an expression selector, and if you need a refresher on how that works because they're kind of complicated, I have a few videos that I'll link down below in the description so you can check that out. In this one, the only special variable or whatever that we have for the expression selector is text index. So every character in here actually is assigned a number. So this first one is 0. Actually, I think text index starts with 1. So this is 1, 2, 3, and so on. Eventually, we're going to pump this X value into noise. So let's first set it to text index. And to get it to move, we need to change that every frame. So to that, we're going to add time divided by this comp.frame duration. So this piece is going to be every frame. So right now we're at frame 0, the next one frame 1, and so on. I've added a slider to this so that we can scale the value of the noise. So then we're going to do x times equals that slider value. If you're unfamiliar with this kind of construction, this is really just x equals x times that stuff, but it's quicker to write the other way. So then we're going to feed that x value to noise, and then we're going to multiply that by 100. And that's because noise will return a value from -1 to 1. So we'll end up with values from the range of -100 to 100. The value that we return in amount controls how much of the effect is applied. For example, if you're pushing position by 400 pixels and you return an amount of 100%, it'll move 400 pixels. If you return 50%, it'll move 200 pixels. Let's turn this on, and you can see that it looks like that. So then I did some more experiments, of course. I changed different values to see what kind of movement I could get. So then I went to text and I started messing with different parameters for the noise. I'll show you how to do that in this next one where I previewed this on Twitter. So this is just using the same kind of text animator, but instead of using position, we're using opacity. So let me open this up. You can actually see what that looks like. So all I have is opacity set to 0. So when this amount is 100, everything is gone. When it's 0, it's all there. When it's -100, it should still be there. Basically just fades away if it's greater than 0. So let's pull this expression into Expressionist. You can see it's a little bit more complicated, but not a lot. You might notice that now we have an X and a Y variable, and that's because now we're using 2D noise. Noise can be up to 3 dimensions. Think of noise or Perlin noise as this 3-dimensional space of random numbers. And what we're feeding into the noise function is a position that we're looking for the random number at that position. So I want to assign an XY position to this text. So this would be 0, 0. This would be X1, Y0. This would be X2, Y0, and so on. So to get a Y value, I need to divide by 3. But the problem is if I divide by 3, this is going to be 1. So these are all going to be kind of staggered because this would be Y0, Y0, Y1. And this would be Y1, Y1, Y2. And obviously these need to be the same number because they're in the same row. So initially I was doing text index divided by 4. So basically whatever this was plus 1. But that's going to offset every time by an extra piece. So what we really need to do is change this back to text index divided by 3. And then we do this check on x. So x is actually going to be text index modulus 3. So by modulusing by 3, we're going to get 1, 2, and 3. We could subtract 1 and get the 0, 1, and 2 like I was originally wanting, but it doesn't really matter that much. The main thing is that the noise field stays consistent. So then we're going to check to see if x is equal to 0, which is what happens when we're on the third character, because 3 modulus 3 is 0. We want it to be 3 instead, so we're going to set x equal to 3. And in this case, we also know we're on the last character again, so I'm actually going to break this back down, and we're going to do x equals 3, and then we're going to do y minus equals 1. So we're going to set it back just one time. So instead of getting that 1, 1, 2 thing I was talking about, it's going to be 1, 1, 1. Then we have a variable called speed, and this is so that you can adjust the speed at which the noise field moves through everything. So we take that original time divided by this comp.frame duration, or our frame number, and we're going to multiply that by a speed slider. And then we take x and y, and we do plus equals speed. So we just tack that speed value right onto the end of the index number, which will shift our noise field through our text. Then we're going to bring in this noise scale slider. I didn't set it up as a variable because I'm only using it twice. It might be faster one way or the other, I'm not sure. But that's going to allow us to actually scale the noise itself. This noise kind of looks like fractal noise, if you can kind of imagine it that way. So this is a similar thing to scaling your noise in fractal noise. So we're just doing x times equals that slider and y times equals that slider. And then the final line, instead of passing in just x, we're passing in an array of x comma y, and those have to be in square brackets. And then we're going to multiply that by another slider called scale. And this is just an overall scale for the entire effect. So if, for example, you had opacity or position or whatever set to 100, and this scale slider was set to 0.5, then this value would be 50 at the end because of that slider. So let's pass this back into here just to make sure that that's updated with our changes. And you might not notice anything different, but at least now it's kind of correct. I'm going to go back and fix all of these for the final download. So next I just went through some examples. I tracked this out so that if it's a square, put some stuff in the background. Then I started messing with lines in a line field. And again, this has that same problem, so I'm going to fix that. But you can kind of see how it all moves through there. And then I got to thinking that the lines actually kind of were like a waveform in a way too. And remember that sometimes there are different things you want to do with like audio spectrum effect, especially if there's not actually any sound tied to it, and you want it to kind of have a look, but you can't get it exactly with that particular plugin. You could use this technique with the pipe character to make different things. And here's just another one of those. So you can kind of see that it does look like an audio waveform. These two have different scales and speeds. Then I started to make other things like this flag you might have seen on Twitter. And what's interesting about this one is that now the noise goes the other direction. For the most part, the movement has been going right to left, and now it goes left to right. So let me pull in one of these real quick, and you can see kind of what is different about this one. It's not a ton, except for we don't have Y values again, because I did each one of these as a single line, but it's very similar otherwise. So here we have X equals, this is the major change to make it go the other direction. So we're taking text total, which is the total number of characters in this line, and we're subtracting text index. So it basically just flip-flops it. And we're just going to multiply that again by noise scale, our slider. So we're going to set up speed the same way. We're going to take our frame number and multiply that by our speed slider. And then we're going to do x plus equals speed. And then noise times effect scale slider. And this is the only other addition to this one. We're multiplying that by the selector value divided by 100. Now, what does that do? Selector value comes from the selectors that come before your expression selector. So if you have your text selected that like it's within the actual range of a range selector, it'll be set to 100. Or if the range is only set to select 50%, then it'll be 50%. So if you move things through in your ranges from your start to your end or whatever, you can see how that actually functions. So you can see this range we have from 10% to 100. So basically everything this way is selected. And there's a feather on here using the ease high set up to 100%. And we have our shape set to ramp up. So it's going to give us a smooth transition into the parts that are moving. So it's kind of like a flag is stuck on the pole on this side, and on this side it's allowed to flow freely. So that's why it doesn't really move until about this area. All of these are pretty much set up the same way. There's a little bit of difference between the way the top ones move and the bottom ones, and that's because there's more characters on the bottom ones because the pipe characters fit closer together. The only other thing that's different about this particular text setup is that they're all right justified instead of left justified. You can probably do it either way, but setting it up with everything right justified was easier. I also noticed that if you don't do this selector value divided by 100 and you just multiply by selector value, you're forcing things to really go one way or the other. And so then you can get weird stuff like this, which maybe if you're doing like a data transmission thing or something, it might actually help you out. You could change this character with character value or character offset and make all sorts of different stuff moving across the screen. And then I just had a bit of fun making a bigger example with a lot more stuff. I was playing off of that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse stuff. So I finally saw it. Thanks, kids. So instead of doing like a motion blur kind of thing or whatever, we kind of thicken this stuff up using rotations. So I have a couple of different layers that rotate. So you can see like that one's on top of this one so that they kind of thicken up. That's the original text. I've got things blinking on and off. I'm using one of those range selectors to kill the expression selector so that it all kind of stops at the end. Got some halftone in there using M's halftone. I probably need to set this up so that these can expand past the outline of the shape, but that's the way it is for right now. If you get an error when you're loading this file, it's probably because you don't have M's halftone, and you should probably get it because it's good. I put in the borders like they did in the movie, kind of with that offset printing technique. I use this old weird screen cap from a tutorial thing I was working on. It kind of looks like a little bit of webbing to come in here. Got a shot that I took of New York in the background with a little chromatic aberration. Regular background back there that you can't really see anything on. Got the character offset, and I'm masking it out so that little pieces of different weird characters show over top. So it kind of has that like glitchy feel from the movie. Of course, not anywhere near to the same level, but I made this in like 30, 40 minutes, so I can't complain. I've got the subtext down here. I've got some character offset with a halftone on this one so that stuff sticks off. And the halftones have gradients, so they start off like a yellow, or in this case a white on this one, and they go to red at the end. So they kind of fade off on their own. And if you grab this file and you happen to want to mess with this, you can change the subtext or the text just by clicking on it, and everything is linked to it. So you can change this text at will, like if you happen to need another artist, hit me up. Hashtag workbench and work. There we go. And that's it. If you guys have any comments or questions, leave them in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe because we do one every week. And if you'd like to help support what we do, check out patreon.com/workbench. Make sure to keep up with the blog at workbench.tv. And as always, I am Joe, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.